Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to my channel. I am Monet and you're watching Life is Monet. So I have some books that have been sitting on my shelf at least 1 year, some of them 2 years. All 5 of these books were books that Aaron specifically told me to read that I have just been putting off for a while, and now they're just pretty much collecting dust. And it's time for me to go ahead and read them. Lately, me and Aaron's taste has shifted away from each other, and I think that's more of like an Aaron thing, because over the last, I want to say 7 to 9 months, yeah, we're gonna say 9 months, over the last 9 months, Aaron's reading taste has changed and she's become like much more of a harsh critic. And these books, most of them are adult fantasy books, but even when our taste was like at its prime and aligned, we still never really loved the same books. And even when we did love the same books, we did not like the same characters or the same thing about the book. So if there is a book that both me and Aaron agree on, I would put my weight behind that book as being like really, really good, because our general takeaways from the books that we read is not the same. She may be there for the plot and the magic system. I may be there for the prose and the characters. And so, yeah, this is going to be a very interesting vlog, but we're going to be reading The Sword of Kaigen, which is a book that I tried to read in like November of 2020 and I DNF'd it. Then we're going to be reading Malice, which is another book that I tried to read in the year of 2020 and DNF'd like 4-5 times. Our third book we're going to be reading is The Way of Kings, and this is going to be my third and possibly last Brandon Sanderson, because I have not been a huge fan of his work from the books that I've read so far. But I have a hardback copy of The Way of Kings that Aaron actually purchased for me for Christmas, and I feel like I at least owe her to try to read it. I kind of want to unhaul it because Brandon Sanderson is just not an author that I think is for me. But Aaron spent her hard-earned coin on this book, going to a job every day that she doesn't necessarily like, and spending time with people that she doesn't necessarily like. Actually, she doesn't like them at all. She doesn't like her job at all. And she decided to take that money and purchase a US hardcover Way of Kings for me. And the least I could do is crack the spine on it. So we're going to give Brandon Sanderson our third try in this video. I've also heard that this is like his best book, so here's to hoping. The fourth book that we're going to be reading in this vlog is The Shadow of What Was Lost, and then the last book that we'll be reading is Leviathan Wakes, which is the only science fiction book in this vlog. And I don't know many science fiction books that me and Aaron share in common. I actually don't think that we share any science fiction books in common. None is coming to mind. I know that she's read Gideon the Ninth, which is a book that I would never touch in a million years. She's read Leviathan Wakes, which I have not read so far. Has she read Children of Time? No, because I'm going to be reading Children of Time with her this year for her book club. I don't know if she's read Hyperion yet. We've both read Dune. She liked Dune significantly more than I did. What is another book that we've read together? Red Rising is an adult sci-fi book that we have both read. Another book that she liked way more than I did. Yeah, this is also going to be interesting to see how I feel about Leviathan Wakes. But yeah, essentially, those are the 5 books that we're going to be reading in this vlog. And I'm going to hope that we keep the suffering to a minimum. Yeah, that's really my only hope. It's been a few weeks since I planned to start this vlog, and I decided that now is the time for me to start reading the books on this TBR for this video. I decided to start today, and I tried to start with The Shadow of What Was Lost. I wanted to do a hybrid read of this because I saw that the audiobook was narrated by Michael Kramer, and I know that that is one of Aaron's, possibly her favorite audiobook narrator. And I was just like, okay, even though she didn't tell me to read, even though she didn't tell me to listen to the audiobooks, I figured it would be fun to kind of experience the books in the same way that she did. So I got the audiobook. But then Michael Kramer has like this sound that sounds like he has a frog stuck in his throat. I have never listened to a book that has been narrated by Michael Kramer. So I decided to pick up the physical book and kind of do a hybrid read where I could follow the words with his voice and kind of get used to it. But for some reason, the copy of my book is different from the words that he's saying. Like literally, he's skipping. Like there's certain paragraphs where he'll end a sentence and like jump to the next paragraph, and there's like 4 or 5 sentences missing, and that is starting to make me very angry. So we're gonna pause here because I may just need to read this book physically myself. I need another book in which I can get used to Michael Kramer's voice, that I can actually hybrid read, and hopefully like that book doesn't skip a lot of sentences. So we're gonna pause here. I'm gonna grab The Way of Kings, which is also narrated by him, and we're gonna try this again. Okay, so I went and got The Way of Kings, and I opened it. And the pages, y'all, I'm about to cry. It's been an emotional month. The pages are Bible thin. That man needs to be arrested. That man is bored. That man is really, really bored. And I am contemplating this entire vlog. This vlog will probably never see the light of day because it's criminal. It's criminal to write this much. Okay? Just because you can do something, that don't mean you should. I think that writing is too easy for Brandon Sanderson, and maybe he needs to go challenge himself. Maybe somebody needs to mail him a chessboard, learn how to play racket, or something, okay? Y'all, we have made a very shocking and disappointing discovery. I switched to the audiobook for The Way of Kings, and I was listening, and I restarted because I wasn't paying attention. Then I was listening, and I forced myself to pay attention. I got about an hour in, then I restarted. And I said to myself, what is it about Brandon Sanderson that just makes me want to check out as soon as I started reading it? Because I had the same experience when I was reading Mistborn. And I'm just like, there's just no way that all these people love Brandon Sanderson. And the only book that I've managed to even remotely like has been Skyward. And the writing is simplistic in both books. So I was trying to figure out what was happening. And I realized, okay, it might be the audiobook. And I looked at the narrator for Mistborn, and it is Michael Kramer. And I checked out and zoned out so much during Mistborn that I could not even tell you what happened in the middle of that book. Like, the only plot points in Mistborn that I can remember now, I read it months ago, so it's been a few months, so we forget stuff after a while, but the only plot points that I can remember from Mistborn are ones that I read physically because I was not keeping track of from the audiobook. So I reached out to Alana, who read Mistborn the same time as me, because we both read it for Aaron's Busy Bee book club, and we were like, I think it was the last show for the year for that book club, and Alana kept zoning out too. And I asked today, I'm like, Alana, when you read Mistborn, did you listen to audio? And she's like, yeah, I listened to the audiobook, but I kept zoning out. And I'm like, okay, I think that is freaking Michael Kramer. It's just something about his voice that makes me want to zone out as soon as I hit play. So I cut off the audiobook, I went back and I read 75 pages physically myself, and those 75 pages was so much better than the audiobook. Like, I retained so much information. I actually enjoyed what I was reading. I cared more about what I was reading. And now I'm sitting here like, it's Michael Kramer. That is why I am not enjoying any Brandon Sanderson books. It's the narrator. And I've just decided that instead of me suffering through this book through audio, knowing that I'm not going to care about what's happening, knowing that I'm going to zone out multiple times. And this is also the last time that I'm going to give Brandon Sanderson a try, because this is the 3rd book and I haven't really loved any of the works. The only one that I liked was Skyward, but I didn't love Skyward. It was just okay. And I didn't like Mistborn. I gave it 2 stars. And so I was starting to get to the point where I was just like, maybe Brandon Sanderson isn't for me. If I can't get even a 4-star from Brandon Sanderson of 3 books that I've read, none of them are 4 stars, Brandon Sanderson is clearly not for me. And so this is the last shot with Brandon Sanderson. And I want to make it fair to him. I want to make it fair to me. And knowing that the narrator is what's been preventing me from enjoying the books. I am going to read physically The Way of Kings. And yeah, we're just gonna go with that. Just keep me in your thoughts and prayers, because it's gonna be a while before I can make my way through this book, because right now I'm actually currently reading 4 other books, and this is happening in the background. It might not be Sanderson, guys. It might be Michael Kramer. One thing that I did do was go through the book and put tabs at the 50-page mark in the book. And if I do 50 pages a day while still reading all of the other books that I'm reading and actually enjoying, I will finish this book in about 20 days. I have done it. I have finally hit 50% in The Way of Kings. And it's been a journey. It's been a journey. This has been it's been something. Let me try to like collect my thoughts. So Kaladin, I guess, is supposed to be the focus point of this book. And I have to say that, like, I'm not really sold. Kaladin really isn't working for me. He's too morally driven to do like the good thing. He has too much honor. And so that's not necessarily the character that I am typically like drawn to. And I also feel like the way that his story is unfolding is also a reason why he's not working for me, because when we meet him towards the beginning of the book, he's supposed to be like beaten down and his hope is supposed to be gone, and he's supposed to be like suicidal and like just someone who has given up completely. And I never bought that for 1 second. And by the time that you start to learn more about Kaladin and like really see how he's just innately driven to just be honorable, to be a leader of the people, you know what I'm saying? To be like the inspiration. Like as soon as you look at Kaladin, you're supposed to be inspired to just do the impossible. And at the start of the book, I also feel like he has already been built up as a character to like withstand anything, to go through anything, to come through the fire unscathed. And I never believed for 1 second that he was really depressed. I never believed for 1 second that he was actually considering killing himself. It's just he's too driven by his morality, and he's just overall too honorable. Like he has too much honor to do a dishonorable thing. And I think that that was the source of his depression, where he felt like he was not living up to his fullest potential in terms of like his honor. And almost immediately he found something else that he could find honor in and like, you know, bring people around. And just, I understand why people would like him as a character, but I'm honestly not sold. I really don't care. And his contribution to this story seems solid from the beginning. Like I already can tell that this is going to be a type of character to do the impossible, withstand death 1,001 times, always inspire people, always make people want to, you know, morale around him. And he's just the unstoppable, unquittable, and like character that's just literally never gonna give up. And I was just not sold on this whole moment where he was like lost in the world and didn't know if he wanted to go on. Now, every other character in this book I do find very interesting. Shalon particularly, and also I think her name Jesna, but no, I think I heard somebody pronounce her name as Yesna. Those two characters are much more interesting. I also find Dalinar very interesting, and yeah, I just can do characters that are not necessarily good or bad, but are just going through the motions. And in terms of a character being lost and not really knowing what to do, I'm more convinced about that for Dalinar. In terms of a character giving up on life and being completely depressed, I am much more convinced about that for Szeth than I am for Kaladin. I do think that Kaladin is resourceful. I do think that he has the ability to like get an aerial view of things and just, you know, make people have faith in him. In terms of the book as a whole, it is too clean. It's too clean. Like stuff is happening. I wouldn't call it boring, but for a 1,000-page book, we are on cruise control. We're not going fast and we're not going slow. And it feels like Brandon Sanderson took the scenic route for this road trip. Like the road trip was always going to be long. I think that he purposely wrote a 1,000-page book just because he can. And, you know, kudos to him. He said, I'm going to write a really long book, and he wrote it. But I feel like I'm going to suffer a death by detail. And I feel like we are cruising on this scenic route to just stare outside the window at all the pretty things as we move along. Now, do I feel like we're getting somewhere? Yes, we're getting somewhere, but not fast and not slow. I feel like he just put this car on 60 miles per hour, and that's the thing. If I have to look at one more tourist attraction, if we have to pull over and look at the world's biggest yarn ball or the world's tallest tumbleweed again, I'm gonna be annoyed. I'm really, really gonna be annoyed. Overall, I just feel like it has, and this could be Kaladin, I just feel like it is lacking in terms of tensity. I am not gripped. It's not feeling like a chore to read, because I feel like if it was very boring, I would DNF it. I would free myself from the bondage of this book. So it's not boring, but it's just like, again, it's just, we're just in a car, like we're just cruising, and like I'm not excited. Like I know that we're gonna get somewhere eventually, but like it's making me wonder if I prefer books that have slow periods and then hike it up, and then have slow periods and then hike it up. Like Jade Legacy was a book that did that, and like the slower parts were definitely like, okay, this part is slow, but it was made up for in the moments where we had like, you know, my jaw was dropping and like I couldn't believe that just happened. I feel like with books in general, or the type of books that I read, there's always like a moment 25% into the book, 50% into the book that shifts and like re-grips the reader, like snatches them back to attention. And that has not happened for me in 500 pages. Like we have started at one pace and we have continuously gone at that pace, and there hasn't been anything to like make me want to compulsively like, oh, you know what I'm saying, that's very interesting, I want to see what's gonna happen with that, so I start like turning the pages faster. It is not. Like he's cruising through the plot and I'm cruising through my reading. If you would have told me that this was his best work, I see it. I see it. This is the best book that I've read. So if you're calling this his best work, I believe it. If I was going to read something from him continuously past his vlog, it would just be the Stormlight Archive, because y'all said that this was his best, and I agree. I agree. This is the best he got, and I would just stick with this. And maybe I will continue if we start following different characters, but making Kaladin the center point of this book is not given. It's not given what it was supposed to have gave. And there is nothing that has happened to make me like snap to attention, like with rejuvenated energy. I have done it. I have finally completed The Way of Kings. I have feelings about this book. Let me put into words. So honor became an underlying theme, not just with Kaladin's POV, but with every POV that we were following. It came to a point where I feel like each of the characters we were following had a counterpoint in their POV that represented corruption, and our characters were supposed to be the one that I guess chooses the honorable choice. And it started to feel like the characters that we were following were being boxed in, and some of the decisions that the characters ended up making throughout the story, I began to wonder if that was what the character actually would have chosen, or if Brandon Sanderson was self-inserting his perspectives and his beliefs throughout the book. Now, immediately when I first started reading this, I could see heavy strands of Sanderson himself in the story. Like from the beginning, there was a significant amount of self-insert, and I was just like, okay, like it's not the first time that I've read a book where the author kind of like influenced the story and drove the story based off like their own perspectives and like viewpoints. But at some points throughout the book, the characters came to a decision, and when you spend 1,000 pages with the character and the author is building up these character arcs and these backstories and like these personalities, eventually you're gonna feel like you know the character a little bit. And so there was a culmination, or like a point in the book where there was a battle, I feel like, between what I feel like the character would have done, what was authentic to the character that Sanderson has created, and then him and his self-insert. And I feel like his self-insert run out throughout the book several times, and I got angry because I'm just like, I don't feel like that is the choice that the character would have chosen. So like there is this epic world with all of these different nuanced characters, and they felt like they had been put back on a leash, and I didn't enjoy that. I didn't appreciate that, and it kind of took me away from the story, because I would have much preferred if the characters just grew into their own being, they came to life off the page, and they just did what made sense and what was authentic to the characters that Sanderson had built. So I didn't enjoy that, and it never gripped me at any point Every character did precisely what I thought they were going to do. Sadius did what I could see him doing 900 pages ago when we first met him. Dalinar did what we knew he was going to do, and he was put into this tough situation which we knew was going to be the cause of other characters, and then Kaladin did exactly what we knew he was going to do. And so the ending of this book was extremely anticlimactic, because I was just like, we were on cruise control for 800 pages or 900 pages, and then this is the ending. Like, it didn't end on like this huge cliffhanger, except for this weird moment that happened in the book, but it would be a spoiler if I mentioned it. But I just was like, the payoff for me reading 1,000 pages was simply not there. I never got a chance to really connect with any other characters, and the characters that I did enjoy like following, especially like Yesna and Shallan, I feel like they were betrayed and they weren't authentic towards the end of the book because of the heavy amount of self-insert. And so it fell flat for me towards the end. I guess because I was so ungripped for a majority of the book, I was looking forward to the ending. I was just like, okay, for us to be going at such a copacetic pace for majority of this book, this ending is going to be the one like that is supposed to be, I guess, gripping. Like, it didn't have to be epic. It didn't have to be mind-blowing, but I needed a little bit more than all of the characters doing precisely what I knew they were going to do. The misinterpretations of history was evident from the beginning of the book. Is it a prequel? Is that the gag? Is this a prequel to the real series? Because that would make sense to me. I know that it is an introduction to a series, but there is a difference when an author writes an epic story and then they go back and do like a prequel. This feels utterly like a prequel, but for it to be the first installation in a story, it just fell flat for me towards the end, and I got increasingly upset between the ending not being gripping, not being intense, being extremely predictable in every aspect, and also the betrayal of our characters that we have spent so much time with coming to know. I still never felt compelled by Kaladin in the end of the story. It just didn't work for me. Kaladin is not a character that I see myself being able to connect with or be invested in or to be able to root for. And towards the end of the book, it got extremely annoying when Kaladin would be put into these situations and he would debate doing the dishonorable thing. And I'm like, I have watched you your entire life. Like, the author felt it necessary to follow you from being born, and he's only like 18 or 19 years old, but you get these intense, intimate moments with his short 18 or 19 years of living. And I know that you are not going to do the dishonorable thing, so wasting 5 to 10 pages of you contemplating doing something that we all know you're not going to do got annoying for me towards the end of the book. I spent 1,000 pages with him and he is still not complex. I spent 1,000 pages with him and I feel like I should know him intimately, but I don't. There's not a high level or even medium level of complexity to Kaladin. He is just someone who is driven by honor and has experienced periods of depression and sadness when he feels like he did a dishonorable thing or he is not leading and inspiring people to just go and do the impossible. That is what drives him. That is his whole identity. And I did not need 1,000 pages to tell me that, because I got it within the first 100. So I think that it was kind of like a loss for me to follow a character for 1,000 pages and they're not even complex. I'm not going to say that Kaladin is two-dimensional. That's not true. He is definitely a full-fledged character. He was very fleshed out, but if I had to break Kaladin down for his two components, it would come down to basically those two, and that would just be it. So maybe if he was older, it would have worked for me because he would have had more experiences, and not even just had more experiences, his mindset and level of maturity and like level of reflection, I guess, would have done more justice to the amount of story that we were following. Because it doesn't matter if all these things happen to a character if they are of an adolescent's mind and they are not as reflective as I feel like an adult would be looking back on their life. Like, if we had got this for Dalinar, who is older and much more reflective throughout the story, I feel like I would have been way more compelled. Or just Yesna's journey. Like, I feel like it came down to Kaladin, and it just did not work for me. And yeah, so I ended up giving this book 3 out of 5 stars. I would have much rather watched this as a TV adaptation. So with that being said, I did start Malice, and I am now 325 pages into this book, and that is a feat within itself, because every time that I have tried to read this book, I have not gotten past page 80. So for me to be 50% into this book is a victory within itself. Now, to be honest, if I didn't have this extreme determination to read this book from start to finish, I probably would have DNF'd it again for the final time and just unhauled it and just came to the conclusion that this book is not going to be for me. This is a character-driven story, or at least where I am. It is very character-centered, and everyone is preparing for this upcoming like God war, and they're all interpreting this prophecy into what they feel like it is going to be. And I feel like I know who the champion of the dark god is going to be and the champion of the light god is going to be, simply off of the character arcs. I feel like with a chosen trope or a chosen one trope is normally very cowardly, meek, scared, and they just resolve within to themselves, and there has to be a whole like training arc, quest to find themselves, quest to understand, you know what I'm saying, this mantle that has been placed upon their shoulders, and then they grow into being the chosen one. And usually with the anti-hero, or the person who's going to be the champion of the dark one, they are overly confident in the beginning. They set forth headstrong. They're convinced that they're going to be the one. And like that over amount of confidence usually tells me that they are not going to be the chosen one, because chosen ones, like I said, are usually very meek and cowardly. So one of the characters, of course, in this book is very headstrong, very confident. They just know that they're the chosen ones. They know that like they're too excited for this upcoming battle. That makes me believe that they are going to be the dark one or the champion for the dark god. They just don't know it yet. With it being so character driven in the beginning, I do not connect with any of the characters, and we follow an excessive amount of characters for this to be a first book, if I'm going to be honest with you, but we constantly change POVs, and there is a consistent number of characters that you see more often than others, but I am not connected, or I am not connecting with any of those characters. Since I am a character-driven reader, reading a character-driven story, if I'm not connecting with any of the characters, that usually results in me DNFing the book. But I'm not going to hold that against this book, because now I feel like I'm more aware of that. And then also, Erin, I'm reading this because of Erin. She loved it. She recommended it. And usually, I do not connect with the characters that Erin does. We don't always love the same fantasy series, but the fantasy series that we do share in common, we are on opposite spectrums of the characters. And that is probably consistent in Jade City, in The Burning, and She Who Became the Sun. Like almost any fantasy book or fantasy series that I can think of, me and Erin usually like completely different characters. And so I don't know which character in this book she loved the most. I know that she really likes Corbin, but I don't know any other character. But even with that being said, her being a huge fan of Corbin, I am not. He's okay, but like, I really don't care about him. I know that probably sounds kind of harsh to say. If I had to pick a character that I would be attached to, maybe Nathar, however you say his name, but we don't even follow him. We get his perspective through the eyes of someone else. So it is disconnecting me, because the person that we're getting his story through, I don't care about. If we were following him directly, I feel like, okay, that would be a character that I latch on to. But unfortunately, that is not the case. I don't have much to say about this other than that. I am indifferent. It is a very detached reading experience, and the only reason why it is still even a reading experience is because I am determined to finish it. I'm not going to DNF it. So I finished Malice, and it's an unhaul. I am going to be unhauling all of my Brandon Sanderson and Malice, as well as I did own Valor, which was book 2. Yeah, this is kind of turned into a bit of an unhaul video, not on purpose, but yeah, I didn't like it. I really don't have anything to say. It was a very detached reading experience. Like I mentioned earlier, I never really connected with any of the characters. It was extremely predictable. There was a decent fighting scene at the end, but I feel like it was extremely too late to try to get me invested into the story. It was more of a setup to get you into book 2, but maybe this just suffered from like debut syndrome because so many aspects of the book just was not executed well. Like even the strong points and the strengths of the book was mild hitting. The author has now written, I don't know, 7, 8, maybe 9 books. So I am sure that his writing has gotten increasingly better. And I would hope that he has learned to lean on the strengths of his book to carry him through some of the weaker points, but it just failed to do that in this book. I do want to try to read more from him, but I think I'm just going to jump ahead to read The Shadow of the Gods because I don't have the patience to stick with this series until it becomes good. And the thing about that is, like, if you read so many books that are like mediocre, when you do like get a good one or one that you love, is it really a good book, or like have you just been suffering for such a long time that like any sliver of something decent is like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm not a person that can read 2 to 3, 4 books in a world before it gets good. I don't have that patience. I DNF'd Throne of Glass because it did not grip me in the beginning. And then that's like another series that comes to mind where people are like, you need to just read 4 or 5 books. No. I can't do it, y'all. I can't do it. I don't know how y'all do it, but yeah, I can't. You gotta show me what you working with in book 1. You gotta give me something to believe. You gotta give me something to hope. And then in book 2, you gotta come stumping. They're like, if I read book 1 and it's mediocre, and book 2 is like, it's a no. This is my stop. Thank you for the ride. But yeah, y'all enjoy the rest of your day. This is where I leave. And I don't think that even with the improvement that is possible in book 2, I don't think that that is enough of an improvement. Like, I could be wrong, but I'm not going to find out. I'm going to be honest with you. This world and the characters and the plot, none of it is gripping enough for me to be like, oh, let me just try book 2. So, we have quite the unhaul pile. About 3 Sanderson books is in this pile so far. 2 John Gwynne books are in this pile. And now we're going into The Shadow of What Was Lost. I would say I'm hoping to enjoy it, but hope has died and been revived and died again in this vlog. So okay, so I just finished The Shadow of What Was Lost, and again, I have opinions. First, I can see how like Aaron enjoyed this book because it shares a lot in common with Malice and The Way of Kings, like specifically The Way of Kings. If you enjoyed the idea of like the magic system a little bit in that book, the plot, the rearranging of history, everyone kind of having ulterior motives in The Way of Kings, I think that you would really enjoy The Shadow of What Was Lost. Now, of all the books that I have read so far in this vlog, this one I won't be unhauling as of yet, and it's actually the only one that I think I will continue in the series with. I don't know if this is this author's first book, and I am kind of coming to terms with the idea that Aaron has more patience for debut authors than I think I do, because getting into this book felt like me and the author was trying to learn how to dance, and he kept stepping on my toes. It was very clumsy throughout majority of the book, maybe until the very end, and the world building was clunky, like dense and clunky. It felt like the author just tripped and the world building went sprawling everywhere, and he was just like, oh, well, that landed over there, so this is the perfect time to explain that, and there's a piece over there, so this is the perfect time to explain that. It felt like the world building just went sprawling everywhere and he left it where it was. So it kept taking me out of the story a little bit, because there were some like very awkward shifts throughout the book, and I'm just like, okay, like we need to learn to work with one another here. We got to figure out our tempo here so that we can actually continue with this story. So for that reason, it definitely wasn't a 4 or 5 star read for me. However, one of the complaints that I had with like The Way of Kings and with Malice is that it failed to like grip my attention. I'm used to, and I prefer books that snap the reader back to attention throughout the books with shocking revelation or violence. I prefer violence, if we're being honest, and James definitely did that repeatedly throughout the story. He would give you moments where like things would escalate and come back down, and no one in this book can be trusted. And so there's a heavy amount of intrigue as you're reading this, because no one can be trusted. There are so many people in this book that don't have access to their memories, and so on top of you not being able to trust people because you know that they're keeping a secret, there's also people that you can't trust because they have no recollection of their past, and those who do think they know their past is still being misled and wrong. So like, it's a book full of Pinocchios, and there is this impending like doom, and you know that somehow your characters are all tied to it. I did enjoy the fact that we follow multiple characters. There are 3 younger characters that we start with, and one becomes the center point almost immediately, and you start to think that he is like this chosen one. And so the author kind of pulled him out of the timeline a little bit to make you spend time with the other characters, to show you that like, hey, all of these people are important to the story, everyone that you're following is important to the story, and like, do not just become attached to one character. So like in the book, you'll get an explanation or a revelation, and then in 100 pages you'll find out that that was a lie, or someone else will explain the same thing in completely different terms, and you're sitting there like, who is telling the truth? Who is lying? A lot of these characters have gone by different names in history, so you are looking for particular characters, and you're like searching throughout the book trying to find clues to pin it to like one character, but there are multiple characters in this book who have gone by multiple names, and so the whole time you could have been, the character that you're looking for could have been right in front of your eyes and you did not know. So there are a lot of things that I did enjoy about this book that makes me want to continue, because of course the author's writing is going to get better throughout the series, and in terms of like my level of patience, this is what I can work with. And so I don't own a copy of book 2 or 3, but seeing as though I just did a huge unhaul, there's definitely room on my shelves. But yeah, this is not beginner friendly. Even if the world building was rolled out in a more pleasant way, or at like a better tempo, it is still extremely dense. Bringing it back to Erin, I think that she just prefers books that are like heavy-handed with the world building and like with detailed magic system, descriptive language, and the characters doesn't necessarily always matter to her. And that is where we kind of differ, because I can do dense world building, I can follow it, but this definitely had me like flipping back and forth sometimes. I should have tabbed this book, but I didn't want to because I was just like nervous that I'm going to end up unhauling this too, so I didn't tab it. But this world building definitely requires you to, if you're on your ebook, to highlight things, keep notes of things, tab things throughout this book. And I think that it's also, I haven't read book 2, but from all of the things that happen in this book, I think it would be necessary for you to go right into book 2 and 3. I don't think that it would be smart to read these books far apart because of how much detail is given within these books, and you knowing that you can't trust characters, you can't trust the history, you can't trust the intentions of like where the story is going. It is so easy for you to lose details, especially because the author chose to give you the world building in kind of like a paint splattering kind of method where, again, it just landed everywhere. I know that sounds crazy, but that's the only way that I can describe this book. But this is the only one that I kind of enjoyed. I will continue. This one was not a fail, so that's the thing. I officially have 2 books left in this vlog. That is going to be Leviathan Wakes and The Sword of Kaigen. As I mentioned earlier, The Sword of Kaigen is another book that I tried to read and I DNF'd like 150 pages in, and it just wasn't working for me. I've noticed that with multiple of the books that I'm attempting to read, I either tried to read it and knew immediately that it wasn't for me and I DNF'd it, or I was never attracted to it anyway. And so I feel like I know my taste good enough to be able to pick away from Erin's recommendations and like books that she loves, for me to be like, I know that I'm not going to like that book, or let me get a sample and like read the first couple of chapters, because that will tell me right away if these books are not for me. The way that I feel about them in the beginning is essentially the way that I feel about them throughout the entire book. I guess that would be a good thing if you are taking recommendations from Erin's channels. You will know right away if the book is not for you, especially because she reads books that are like 700 to 1,000, 1,200 page books. And so you will know within the first 100, at least for me, that like, yeah, this one is not for me. In terms of like epic high fantasy and classic fantasies, there's a wide spectrum, and me and Erin are definitely on the far end of it. I'm surprised that she has enjoyed these books as much as she did, because I would expect that she would like violence in her stories, but I guess if you give her complex enough world building and like complex enough magic system, she will overlook the lack of violence. And I feel like violence for me is non-negotiable. Don't really care what world building you give. I don't really care how amazing your characters are, how descriptive and magical your magic system is. If no one's dying, why am I here? 2 more books left in this vlog. Hopefully we don't have to DNF the Sword of Kaigen again. Overall, all of these books have been sitting unread on my shelf for over a year. Some of them have been on here 2 years, going on 3 years. So this is still funny enough that the same day that I finished the Sword of Kaigen, I actually got 2 pieces of book mail from Erin. And these are books that she specifically picked for me according to my taste, so I'm very interested in them. The first is Chue, I believe. This is following a woman who is pregnant, and she is pretty certain that her baby is going to be an owl baby, and she tells her husband that, but it makes him rather uncomfortable. And when the child is born, it seems more predatory bird than baby. And the mother vows to raise her baby to be her most authentic self, but she discovers that her husband is on an obsessive and increasingly dangerous quest to find a cure for their daughter. The mother must decide whether to raise her baby to fit in or to be herself, and she goes on a journey to learn exactly what it means to be a mother. So this sounds very like unorthodox and outside of the box, not really contained, and Erin knows that I love stories that can't be boxed in. I love a book that has a good balance between like figurative and like literal sense, and this book seems like it teeters on that, and it's also very short, which sounds amazing since I've been reading such long books for this video. The second one is a very short one. It's only like 90 pages, and I am a guinea pig for it. That's what the note said, but I don't care because I'm very excited for this one, and that is going to be The Fall by Ryan Cahill. I think that this is a prequel into the series, the Broken and the Bound series, because this is the novella. The Order have watched over the continent of Etheria for 1,000 years, but there are those who believe the Order has had its day, that it is corrupt, indulgent, and deceitful, and that it is ready to fall. The city of Ilnaean, the cover is making it hard for me to see, but the city of Ilnaean is on fire. Dragons fill the skies, traitors fill the streets. I think it's really cool that you have a novella that's like 85 to 90 pages that can get you used to the world and also like give you a taste of the author's writing to see if it's something that you're interested in. So maybe I'll try and fit this novella into this vlog before we finish. Either way, thank you, Erin, for the book mail. Now back to The Sword of Kaigen, which I actually finished earlier today, and I gave 4 out of 5 stars. This was such a slow process for me to like fall in love with the story, because as I mentioned earlier, I DNF'd in the beginning because I wasn't necessarily connecting with the male main character that we were following, which is Misaki's son. And Misaki starts off as like such a slow, detached, emotionally and like mentally detached character, and she seems very stoic and just out of touch. And the journey of Misaki waking up to herself and coming to terms with like her reality and taking back control of her life when she had let go of it for so long. So Misaki is the main character of this book, and it is a standalone fantasy. And essentially, I don't always go towards standalone fantasies because I feel like when you have a fantasy book, especially an adult fantasy, that is only one installation, you sacrifice some things that you would get full payoff for in a series. So you either sacrifice a stable plot, or you sacrifice character development, you sacrifice world building or magic. And I think that M.L. Wang did exceptional with a standalone fantasy, because the few things that we had to sacrifice, I did not notice. By the end, I was completely compelled. I was completely invested. I was very proud of Misaki. So she's definitely going up there with some of my favorite characters to follow. And because I really enjoyed being on the journey with her as she learned to become a version of herself that the younger version of her would be proud of. And there's that. Also, there was death. There was murder. There was battle scenes. There was fighting. There was violence. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. Highly recommend this book. I went with the audio this time since the first time I read it and didn't finish it, I tried to read it physically. And I feel like the audio did a good job getting me through like the beginning hump of the book, because the first like quarter of the book is rather rough and it takes a while to like get into the story. But literally like 30% into the book, it was like boom, we got action, and it was pedal to the metal from then on. I'm actually very glad that I made it to the end of this book. I know that this is a book that wrecked a lot of people. I didn't cry during this book, but I was essentially very proud, very satisfied with everything that was going on in the story. So that one was a winner. And I am proud to say it. We have one more book in this vlog, and that is going to be Leviathan Wakes. I am coming up on 100 pages of Leviathan Wakes, and I'm gonna DNF. I'm gonna DNF. I know that I am not going to enjoy this book. I know that it is not for me. I am not even remotely, not even a little bit interested in anybody or anything that's happening in this book. In terms of popular sci-fi, I never seem to connect with them. Like the first half of Dune was way better than the second. I found that the second part was extremely convoluted. I liked the adaptation of the book way more than I liked the book. And another sci-fi series that I remember enjoying was like The 100, but not the books, only the show. The Martian is another example of a sci-fi novel that I only really liked in movie form. And so with this, since it is a show on Amazon, I'm going to try to watch one episode of the show, because maybe it would translate better in adaptation than in the book. But yeah, there's just nothing that is working for me in this book. And like, I would have never purchased this book if Aaron had not like tried to encourage me to read it. So this is not like a fault to like her or like to the book, but I knew about the book and had zero interest. Like my interest was probably like -30. And so I like, even knowing that the book existed, I had zero interest in reading it. Like when I was watching the reviews or reading reviews of people who had read the book, I never heard any buzzwords, any keywords that made me want to think, oh, let me pick this book up. There was never any interest. I usually know when there is potential for me to like a book or not like a book. And so this is another example of a book that I don't think was really for me, but I'm going to try it in TV form. I'm gonna watch an episode of the show, and I will crochet my blanket that I'm working on, and then we'll be back. I have watched the show. It was okay. It was just okay. It is not a show that I think I would watch again at all. So now I know like with confidence that this series is just not for me. We are at the end of this vlog, and what have we read? We read The Way of Kings, which I think I gave 3 stars and ended up unhauling. Won't be continuing with that series as of now. Then I read Malice, which is a book that I also unhauled and gave 2 stars. I know with certainty that I won't be finishing that series. I won't be continuing, but I will try The Shadow of the Gods to see if the new series is for me. And then we read The Shadow of What Was Lost, which was actually pretty interesting. I did not rate that book because I am continuing with the series. So right now I am limiting my ratings for individual books and series that I plan to continue in. So I don't have a rating for that one, but it would be the equivalent of maybe like a 3.5 or 4 stars if I was to give it a rating. But that one I enjoyed probably the most in this vlog. Then I read The Sword of Kaigen, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. That one was a book like several others that I mentioned in this video that I DNF'd and then went back and finished, but I ended up really enjoying that one, so that one was a win. And then I tried to read Leviathan Wakes, but I know that that is not for me. I will not be finishing that book. I will also be unhauling it, and so there's that. So all in all, I will be unhauling 3 of the 5 books that I attempted to read in this video. I only enjoyed 2 of them. And so, yeah, this was a very interesting experience. It just goes to show that, like, even in the book community, in terms of, like, fantasy, not all fantasy readers are a monolith. Like, fantasy books as a whole just have, like, so much going on with the story in terms of like the magic and the plot and the characters and the lore and the prose and the world building, and like there's so much in a fantasy book that even when you have several fantasy readers who love the same book, they may all love it for extremely different reasons, and you'll never know where you fall on that spectrum until you actually pick it up and read it for yourself. In terms of me and like my taste in comparison to Aaron's, I feel like I know my reading taste. I know what I will enjoy and what I will not enjoy. And so having that confidence within myself and like my own taste allows me to take from her recommendations what I know that I will enjoy, because we don't always enjoy the same things about the same things. Thank you guys for watching this very long vlog and kicking it with me. And I have some more videos like this up and coming. And so I will see you guys next time.